Hello, my name is Mary Mack, and I'm the Executive Director of ACEDS, the Association of Certified E-Discovery Specialists. And I'm delighted to bring you to this summer school webinar series on the ACEDS webinar channel. We have a fabulous product service showcase for you. And before I get into the details there, as always, your questions are very important to us. The Q&A panel is down at the bottom of your screen, and you'll receive an email with a link to the recorded presentation afterwards. And without further ado, we have a wonderful combination of one of our newest affiliates, H5 and Milyli, is going to, the two of them are going to present Finding PII, Personally Identifiable Information Challenges, with a one-two punch, H5's Matter Analytics with Milylis Blackout. And these two are some of the best-kept secrets in our industry. The combination is going to be quite powerful. And in order to do that, we have with us Jason Richard. He is the VP of Product at H5, and he has earned the stripes. He started out at H5 as Litigation Support Manager, Director of Operations, moving his way up through increasing responsibility to now the VP of Products. So we are very excited, Jason, to have you here, and we're very excited also to see what the combination of H5 and the various techniques you've brought over the years to reducing data sets and producing only what needs to be produced with Milyli. Very, very excited to see this. Jason?
Thank you, Mary. I'm Jason Richard, VP of Products for H5. We thank everyone on the line for taking the time to see what we're up to today. I look forward to spending the duration of this webinar with you. For those of you who aren't familiar with H5, for the past 20 years, we've been specializing in providing search and data analytics solutions to companies and law firms that help them find key facts and insights in the context of e-discovery, investigations, and other data management challenges. We're joined in this webinar today by Steve Inkenbrandt from Milyli, the developer of Blackout, which we'll also be highlighting today. Steve, would you like to introduce yourself and say a few words about Milyli?
Yeah, thank you, Jason, and thank you to Mary and the ACEDS team for having us here today. As Jason mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Milyli, and for the past 11 years, Milyli has been developing solutions for e-discovery with a focus on the relativity platform. Our flagship product, Blackout, is an automated redaction solution for relativity, and today we are excited to show you the power of Blackout working together with H5 Matter Analytics. Thanks, Jason.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. All right, before we get started, we're going to start things off with a quick poll question regarding your experience with personal information that must be redacted in matters. We'll give everyone a few moments to respond to the question, and then we'll move on to the results. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move to the next slide so we can see some of the results. All right, interesting. Well, it does look like there's an increasing need with the need to identify PII and think about redaction for personal information that occurs in the matters. So it's good to see that this is starting to become an increasing need and increasing interest with the different organizations on the line today. Hopefully we have something today to show you that's very applicable to exactly that need. Okay, well, let's get started. So we'll be starting the discussion with an explanation of why PII is emerging as an important topic in our lives in the legal industry. We'll take a look at our H5 Matter Analytics solution, which is our proprietary technology that's focused on accelerating document review with some key features pertinent to today, which is really about our unique approach to PII identification. We'll then take a look at Milylis Blackout solution, the industry leader in auto-redaction solutions inside of relativity, as well as how these technologies can work together as a powerful combination for managing PII in the context of document review. And finally, we'll provide you with a live demonstration of both applications at work and finish up with some questions and answers. Okay. So to frame the topic for today's presentation, why do we care about identifying PII? Privacy is a growing concern with organizations, with many on high alert for a number of different reasons. And just to name a few, one example is because there's been a breach. It's critical to respond quickly in notifying individuals whose information may have been exposed in a cyber breach. Additionally, when you think about regulators certainly care. Increasing regulatory demands surrounding data privacy, including a data subject's right to see, correct, and have companies erase information under GDPR in Europe and CCPA in California, require organizations to better manage personal information about their employees, customers, and users.
And Jason, another reason is because the individual cares. We are seeing an increased demand on organizations to respond to a growing volume of DSARs, and in doing so, they really have to address the PII of others when responding to those. And finally, the last reason is really around needing to just keep that personal information personal and private. We find organizations needing to more efficiently identify and redact personal and patient information in the context of everyday standard litigation. So definitely a lot of reasons why folks are looking to redact PII these days, Jason.
That's exactly right. Okay. All right. Well, the next slide is my favorite part, which is where we get to talk a little bit about H5 Matter Analytics. So H5 Matter Analytics is a solution we developed inspired by a lot of our extensive experience in analytics and accelerating document review that we've been bringing to the industry over the past 2 decades. We focused on developing a solution with techniques and workflows that we know work and have been battle tested over many years of delivering expert services to our customers. As with Blackout, Matter Analytics is a fully relativity integrated application that can be licensed and deployed on-premise within your relativity environment, as well as offered as a part of our services. Some key strengths of Matter Analytics include our linguistics-based approach to PII identification, advanced email threading and name normalization capabilities, and much more. We also have an easy-to-step-into licensing model, starting with a pay-as-you-go per document model, and an ability to preview results before incurring any fees. We'll talk a little bit more about all of this as we show the product in our live demonstration. Now let's talk about some of the challenges in finding PII. The number one challenge is linguistic variability, or rather all of the different ways a concept can be expressed in words. For example, references to an individual's medical condition. There's an endless number of ways that these concepts can be discussed, whether it's a discussion of the condition itself, treatments and therapies for the condition, and so on. Search terms and regular expressions would only scratch the surface and would generally result in many false positives and important documents being missed. Data quality can also present challenges, as oftentimes PII information may exist in handwriting only or scanned documents with inconsistent OCR. In terms of how we address those challenges, we really utilized a mix of strategies for targeting the PII. The first was to limit over-inclusiveness, which is essentially reducing the false positives. We looked for additional context and linguistic markers in proximity to regular expressions and other types of term hits, essentially looking for corroborating information to make a PII assessment. To limit misses or false negatives, we used an approach that H5 has been using for decades that focuses on iteratively developing and testing sophisticated search queries against data sets to cover linguistic variability. One of the benefits of having solutions developed by a service provider that specializes in the area of search and analytics is that we're continuing to build on a foundation of real-world experience. Our PII development has been built from knowledge gained in over 30 million documents across 50 different diverse data populations and many different industries ranging from healthcare to tech. And the result is a battle-tested approach to PII identification that provides an unparalleled foundation for finding PII in any matter. Our 14 categories of PII contain over 10,000 search queries, some of which, if printed, would be pages long due to the range of complexity and content variability that we account for. Today, there are currently 14 categories of PII that H5 Matter Analytics looks for, ranging from more traditional pattern content, such as Social Security numbers, to types with more linguistic variability, such as medical information and HR-related information, so things like resumes, employee evaluations, offer letters. H5 Matter Analytics tags results with these listed types, with one exception, which is medical information, which receives one top-level tag called medical information, but includes concepts such as the sub-bullets listed here, which gives you a good look into the types of content we're able to look for as a part of our medical information category. Another key detail about our results is the way we created 2 tiers of tagging for each of our targeted PII categories, which is really to separate results by likely indicators of PII and those containing potential indicators. Likely tags is going to identify sets of documents with a high likelihood of containing PII content based on search queries developed and tested to perform with very few false positives. Potential PII tags identify sets of documents with some loosened rules to maximize coverage of what's identified with an expected increase in false positives, but in exchange for minimizing false negatives. Here we can just demonstrate a simple example of how this works in the context of one of many credit card queries. In our example here, we have a credit card number with an assortment of information present. To establish a likely hit, we may require a combination of other supporting details to tag a document as a likely credit card hit. This boosts the confidence of our decision because we have corroborating context. Regarding a potential query example, unlike the likely hit where we use an assortment of context cues and present on the document to tell us it's really a credit card, our potential tags are meant to minimize content from falling through the cracks. As such, we can rely on minimal information, such as the credit card number, and a supporting label to establish a potential PII hit. This helps maximize our coverage. From a workflow perspective, you'd focus first on your likely category hits to front-load the high confidence content, and then expand your review to include the potential PII documents for broader coverage. Steve, now I'm going to hand it over to you so that you can give us an overview of Milyli and Blackout.
Thanks so much, Jason. Hello, everyone. For those of you on the call today that do not already know a lot about Milyli and Blackout, I thought it'd be great to start off and give you a little bit of background. The Milyli team has worked with Relativity for over a decade, giving us insights into both the platform and the real-world needs of Relativity users. So as we racked up those thousands of development hours, we also built out a team of experts, not just in Relativity, but e-discovery. And those insights drove us to develop Blackout and to be the first Relativity 1 certified development partner. This summer, we released version 3.0 of Blackout, which does quite a few awesome things. Provides a massive 70% performance increase so you can get your mass redaction jobs done even faster than before. It significantly improves the accuracy on images, and now we have full multi-language support on our images as well, something that we always had with the native Excel files in Blackout. And really, since its launch in 2015, there is no other redaction tool out there that can automate redactions as quickly and accurately as Blackout. And to show that to you a little bit, so far this year, in 2019 here, we've actually done just under 80 million redactions across a little over 800,000 documents in all of our installed instances with Blackout. So definitely battle-tested and being used a lot by the market out there, by the e-discovery market. And I think the really best way to explain Blackout is with a real-world story. So let me tell you one here quickly. Leidos is a Blackout customer who primarily focuses on government clients. They came to us with an urgent need for Blackout on a case which arose when they had a very short time frame for second pass review. And I'm guessing from all of the folks that I've talked to in law firms and service providers across the country and around the world, this is a challenge I'm guessing many of you have faced, is no second pass review is generally done in a super long time frame. So Leidos need to redact Social Security numbers, dates of birth, phone numbers, emails, and they also needed to anonymize names on a very large set of documents where that anonymization, they were replacing quite a few individuals' names with employee identifiers in the documents themselves. And they told us after the case, when we talked to them a little bit more about it, that they estimated doing this work manually would have taken the small team they had for this case, small team of reviewers for this case, a little over a year to actually do all that redaction. And with Blackout, they were able to do this work in just a few weeks. So definitely a case study there showing off the power of Blackout, and something we hear quite often across the board from our customers that are using the product. So why is Blackout trusted by so many of the law firms, government agencies, and legal service providers globally? Well, it's because it was designed to solve real-world challenges. Those challenges can be anything from high-volume cases or a team with limited bandwidth. Some examples include inverse redaction on pharmaceutical documents. Common story there, where you have one drug in question. You need to hand over documents showing information around that specific drug, but you need to redact everything else in those documents because it's all still R&D, right? Also, PII on cross-border disputes. We see a ton of redaction needs there and have since early 2015. That was an early primary use case for Blackout. We also see a lot of redacting on scanned documents, such as healthcare forms and PHI. Hit highlighting, something we see a lot with law firms, hit highlighting terms on received productions that are coming in from the opposing party. And finally, PII on redaction for DSARs, something that we've seen quite a bit, as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, over the last couple of years that's been heating up, especially with GDPR. So here I wanted to show you how Blackout works in just 3 simple, easy steps. The first is you're going to tag your documents and group them into a saved search in relativity. You're going to apply your rules, which can be a list of terms or pattern matching rules, and then you're going to run Blackout to redact and or highlight any of those terms or rules on your documents. And Blackout's going to use regular expressions for those pattern matching rules in the documents, including the ability to redact partial words and phrases. You can select from Milyli's library of existing rules. You can write your own, or you can reach out to our support team. They're busy here every day helping customers write new rules specific to their case for things that they need to redact within their documents. So just kind of wrapping up here, let you know, Blackout's the only relativity solution that redacts and highlights both native Excel files and image files. And with Blackout, your review team can really redact documents accurately and quickly, allowing them to spend more time on their key decisions. And that, we've found with our customers, really allows them to provide an overall higher quality review of the documents themselves. So why spend time on redacting when you can spend more time making those core decisions that the attorneys spent all that time going to school to figure out how to do. So with that, Jason, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Steve. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the workflow of pairing matter analytics with Blackout. And really, at the end of the day, if we focus in on what each application is very good at, matter analytics is using some very battle-tested means of identifying the presence of PII by looking at a lot of different features on a document, so a lot of context and a lot of other information that we're thinking about, not just the PII values themselves, but really the surrounding information on the document. And so that's going to bring back some really rich documents and a very well covered set of documents from a PII perspective. And then Blackout is going to be very good at applying and automating rules that you've developed to target specific types of information for redaction. As we mentioned earlier, both applications are integrated in relativity. So the first step is really to get the documents inside of relativity such that they can be analyzed through matter analytics. Matter analytics can direct the algorithms directly at a saved search inside of relativity, run the analysis, and then apply tags to the documents as it encounters PII and tag them by the respective category of PII that it identified. And then from there, it gets handed off to Blackout.
Yeah, Jason, after those documents are tagged and the documents can then be served up to Milylis Blackout, we create a job there and run it and do that auto-redaction. And then after the auto-redaction job is run, the results can be organized in a couple different ways. And so this is important for everyone to understand and how the two tools really work together. You're going to find a number of documents where Blackout was able to redact the content in the H5 result set. So those are great. Found all the PII. We're able to go through and redact it automatically with your rules on your Blackout job there. And then you're going to have a second set of documents, which we're going to talk a bit more about in the demo. Those are documents where Blackout did not redact the content in the result set. And that's generally going to indicate that you've had handwritten PII information or potentially documents where the OCR quality wasn't quite there. Blackout wasn't able to find that spot to redact on the image. But we've got your back with H5 Matter Analytics because we identified that PII, so you can still go in and take a look at it and identify those documents with your review team manually and find that content. So I think that takes us to our demo, right, Jason?
All right, perfect. It does indeed. And just a reminder, if you have questions about what you're seeing, about what we're talking about, feel free to use the Q&A system inside of the webinar, and we'll do our best to get the questions here at the end. Okay, so now I'm going to hop into relativity, and we'll show these applications working together. Okay. All right, so we're inside of relativity, and we've got both matter analytics and Blackout operating inside of this workspace. Again, both applications are directly integrated in relativity. Content does not need to leave relativity. It can stay where it is, so you're not doing any sort of unnecessary duplication of content, and there's not a lot of overhead in operating and managing the use of the analytics and the results. So I'm going to click on my Matter Analytics tab here and take a look at what we have. So the landing page here is a list of all the different jobs or sets that have been analyzed against this data population. Matter Analytics can do a number of things. Up here we have relationship identification analytics, which includes things like email threading, name normalization, near duplicate identification, as well as text duplicate identification, which is basically taking documents if you remove formatting and white space that come through as exactly duplicative but may not hash the same. So it can be valuable for a number of reasons. But the thing that's most pertinent to our conversation today is down here below with content identification, which is where we're able to run our PII identification against a workspace. Before I hop in and show you the interactive report of the results that this PII set has for us, I'm going to show you how easy it is to actually run a PII job or any type of job inside of Matter Analytics. You simply click Create New Set. You identify or provide a name. You select a saved search inside of relativity. You can identify different individuals you want to be notified as the job moves through and completes. Each individual is going to get a nice email that shows a high-level summary of the results that were captured during the process. And then you can come through and identify what type of algorithm you want to run. In this case, we're going to run PII identification. You're available to us in terms of what categories we can run, size thresholds to help to optimize performance, as well as an ability to map some of the field information that our classification systems are going to work on to make sure we maximize the efficacy and accuracy of the results. Now that we've shown you how easy it is to run a PII set inside of Matter Analytics, I'm going to go back to our screen and take a look at what a completed set would look like. So here, the first thing that we see is information about the saved search that was analyzed. We've got a document count, some file size information, some high-level record type composition details. You can see the custodians that were analyzed, a topography of the timeline for the data that was analyzed, as well as the different types of files that went through the process. But the most interesting information here is going to be in our summary card, which is interactive. So I can click on the summary card and then take a look at some of my high-level details before I get into the more granular information. At a summary level, this process identified 6.58% of the data population that was analyzed as containing some form of PII marker. We can see here that we've got 106 documents that were identified as likely. We have 882 that were identified with some sort of potential PII class of content. And then we've got any exceptions or maybe items that were too large based on our size threshold that you can look at and interrogate manually. And then we also have documents that were not identified as containing any PII markers, and that you can put through in a separate workflow, analyze it in different forms, and use different concepts to be able to interrogate that content as well if you're looking to maximize and complete your coverage. So here, if we look at the PII type results, we can see all of the information that we identified broken down by different PII categories. Additionally, you're going to be able to see that all of the information is broken out by likely and potential information. So this again gets back to likely being our high confidence content and our potential content or potential tags being documents where we have loosened the rules a little bit to help maximize our coverage. And then if we go down here, we can see how we then intersect that information with things like custodian details, file type details, and break out that information by likely and potential.
Hey, Jason, I wanted to jump in here and mention that these rules are a great source for building your Blackout jobs, and I think this is another touch point for everyone on the webinar to think about how Blackout and matter analytics work together. When I first saw this report, I understood the power of matter analytics and saw how the two products really would work better together. As you can see, the different types of results here, the Social Security numbers, credit card information, these are generally types of PII that we have established rules for in Blackout that you can build your jobs around. So you can imagine being able to run your matter analytics searching here against your document set, see what type of PII is coming back, and then really, focus your Blackout job on the specific PII there versus kind of going in and doing sampling, which I think a lot of our customers do today when they're not running a tool such as matter analytics to identify the PII. So this is really awesome and super powerful in how the two pieces of software can work together to get this PII found and redacted.
Excellent. Excellent. Thanks, Steve. All right. Now that we've seen the analysis here, and we've actually brought in PII tagging information on top of our documents, let's go look at some results. So we've got three searches here that we're going to go over as a part of our demo today, but the first one I'm going to focus on is has PII. This is a list of all of the documents that Matter Analytics identified as containing PII based on the categories that we looked for. If we look out here to our likely and potential fields, this is exactly the information that Matter Analytics is applying to the documents. And the nice thing about this is it's really helping augment your existing workflow. It's not introducing some new path that you need to take. It's applying tags directly to the documents. You can then create saved searches. You can create batches. You can interact with the results in any way you see fit because we're essentially just adding tags and choices. You can create relativity dashboards, all kinds of things. But for today, our has PII document set is what we want to actually run Blackout against to be able to analyze the content and apply redactions automatically. So let me go ahead and click on my Blackout tab. And here we see a job list of the Blackout jobs that have been run. And we can see here, the first one we have is called PII. We have a saved search called has PII. That's the exact same search that we just looked at in terms of all of the documents that Matter Analytics was able to identify. Now I'm going to click on the job itself. So on this reporting screen, we're able to see that the document set, the has PII search has been analyzed. We have a number of redactions that have been applied. We have some redactions you may want to remediate due to different conditions as it went through and analyzed the content. And we can take a look at the rules that were used to go through and auto-redact the documents. I think this rules list is a good example of where you may use our reporting to help inform the rules you need to develop because you've already been able to determine that there's different types of PII that's present and some things that you may not have in your standard list.
Yeah, Jason, if I can jump in there, definitely that is what we were looking at in those initial rules, and everyone on the call here can see the example in Blackout of taking some of those PII results and building the specific pattern matching rules in here, which again, we've got a library of, or our customer advocacy team is always here to help with, and you can go ahead and populate those in as rules within your job, looking just for that information. And additionally, Jason, if you can jump back over the job status tab quickly, I wanted to mention we've talked a lot about the likely PII, and another touch point here is you see when you process your Blackout job, some missing redactions here. So we're doing an image job, and in those cases, we all know that OCR is an imperfect technology, and we can't always extract from the OCR where those hits are, but we do know from the text, the extracted text from the native, that some of those terms are there. So that's another touch point where H5 Matter Analytics has found these documents. They have PII, and there's also kind of a sub area in the middle there where Blackout also finds some degree of that information and points you a safe search of those documents where you would need to take a look manually. So definitely, again, the power of the two tools working together to find all of your PII and get you through that process of making sure you're redacting it. Thanks, Jason.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. There's a lot of QC opportunities in here to continue to maximize your coverage and leverage these technologies to make sure they're doing all the things that they do best and work together to really help provide that extended coverage. All right. So we've analyzed some documents. We've applied redactions. Some documents that we've analyzed weren't identified through Blackout as being open to redaction because maybe there's some handwritten content or some rules that couldn't be applied, or maybe rules that we didn't develop for. So what's in there is out of scope for what we developed inside of Blackout. So let me click back on our documents and we'll take a look at some of these examples. So our second search here is where we have documents where H5 Matter Analytics identified the presence of PII and Blackout applied redactions. Our next search is documents where H5 identified PII, but Blackout didn't apply redactions. Again, it could be due to the fact that the content is handwritten. It could be due to the fact that there's rules that we still have yet to build because we didn't know about the presence of certain flavors of PII in the documents. Well, let's take a look at where we agreed here and applied redactions. Again, I can see that we've got our likely and potential tags applied to these documents. We've got has redactions from the redaction process with Blackout. Now I'm going to get into a document. All right. Here's a tax form where we can see that redactions have been applied automatically to the document. And if we look at the tags that H5 Matter Analytics has applied, we can see that Matter Analytics was able to find indicators of IRS and tax information, account and financial details, general form details, as well as Social Security numbers. And if we come down here to look at the Blackout markups, we get a summary of all of the different information that Blackout was able to identify on the document and have an opportunity to accept, reject, or supplement the redactions on the document. Right, now I'm going to get to the next document. All right, this is a fun example because here H5 has identified a number of different features on the document. We found details here about contact information, HR information, Social Security numbers, as well as password and security questions. And this comes from our username column here. And we see that the Social Security numbers have been redacted automatically through the Blackout process. Again, we can approve or accept and reject. But one of the nice things about working with Excel files with Blackout is the ability to interact with those spreadsheets in their native form. So I'm going to click on the viewer. And here I can see the redactions have been applied directly to the Excel file. And not only that, I can continue to do work on the spreadsheet to redact columns or even cell ranges that contain information that I want to redact. Again, without leaving relativity, all of the work being done right inside, and then the natively redacted document can then be incorporated into productions or whatever needs to happen downstream of the documents. So a really great showcase, I think, of the native capabilities inside of relativity.
Hey, just to jump in, Jason, thanks for popping over there into the viewer. I think this would be a good moment to remind everyone if there's questions to go ahead and add those in the Q&A, because this was a question that we had here that I saw come through was the question about native support for redactions. And the answer is today Blackout can do native redactions in Excel files. We are actually looking at some other file types here on the roadmap coming up, but for everything outside of Excel today, we redact on the image. But yeah, with Excel, definitely powerful and something that a lot of our customers asked for early on, and we released a couple of years ago. Everyone knows the pain of imaging Excel files if that's the route you go. Some of these can be hundreds or thousands of pages, and if you don't do that, you're generally pulling them out of relativity, which folks don't like to do. So yeah, perfect. Thanks for jumping over the viewer there, Jason. Love to mention that to everyone that and answer that question that we had from one of our viewers here. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So now I'm going to switch back to the image viewer. And I'm going to show you something else exciting, which is a proprietary viewer with H5 Matter Analytics. So our next example here is an email with some information. Looks like Blackout's done a great job of identifying some date of birth content, some Social Security number details. But we have a passport number, and that hasn't been redacted. And so now we need to go through and make sure that not only this version of the email, but all of the emails that may exist out in the document population in this thread are redacted appropriately. That may get accomplished through a manual redaction process, or maybe you want to develop new Blackout rules to go through and try to capture these documents again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and go to my H5 thread viewer. and show you how we can interact with this in a really nice way. So I'll zoom out a little bit here. So our map view here is going to provide an overview of the entire thread. You'll be able to see how information branches. You're going to see how content exists within the thread that may contain PII. We've got our field tag here that shows that this message that we're on, message number, this is node 5 in our map view, is where the PII is present. And so this gives you a nice way of visualizing and understanding how that information has now been propagated and proliferated further down the thread. Now, one of the nice things about our viewer is not just the map view, it's a specialized viewer that we have down here that we call a conversation view. The conversation view is a view that takes every single unique part of the communication throughout the thread and assembles it in order and in context so that you have a very easy way of reviewing the full extent of the message before you go through and apply any coding or redactions. So here, without even leaving the document, I can review all 26 documents in this thread by simply scrolling through and taking a look at the content. There's a lot of neat features in here. We link to things like name normalization details, and you can pop out the viewer, put it on a second monitor. There's a lot of different ways to interact with this content, but it provides a really powerful way of, without even navigating to a new document or pressing a button, to review an entire thread. The other thing that's nice about this, and I saw a question related to QC, is that when PII exists in email, it's kind of a needle in the haystack. That's not the most common place that it's going to exist or reside. But with a thread viewer, you can use this to interrogate things like the documents that had no PII markers, for instance, and go through very, very quickly a thread at a time, a conversation at a time. You can actually skip ahead to threads with these buttons up here. And make sure that you're reviewing all of that content in a very accelerated way. Here, I can see that this is the message that I was on that contains some of the date of birth and social security number information. I confirmed that nothing before this contained any PII details. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select this entire thread, or this entire segment of the thread. I can come down here and filter and take a look at everything that I just selected. Looks like we've got a MasterCard in here too. We've got some other details further down the thread. That's great. Now, I'm going to mark those items that I've selected, and I've got two options. I can use the Relativity Edit button and use a relativity layout, or I can use the H5 Matter Analytics Edit button, which gives me some smart propagation options. And this is really powerful because oftentimes you may want to apply a mass edit, but you don't want to do it to the full thread. You may not want to do it to the attachments. You may not want to do it to the duplicate spares. You may want to be very nuanced in how you're applying coding decisions. So here, we don't have any attachments, so it's a little bit easier. But I'm going to go ahead and say I want to mark these all as requires redaction. This is pulling from a relativity field. This isn't an H5 field. It's just giving you a nice presentation around it and allowing these propagation options to work. And I'm going to click Save. So now, all the documents from node 5 all the way down the thread are now going to be a part of a redaction queue, whether that be new rule building through Blackout or manual redaction that needs to happen. Got one more example here, which I think is a nice example of how easy PII can proliferate itself in email communications. Got a nice big thread here. There's a lot of conversations happening. I can see here with my purple tag that it looks like we've got the introduction of likely PII on node number 3. I'm going to click on this node, and we've got some visa information and other details. One of the nice things about our conversation view is we can actually bring in PII highlighting on what it is that we actually identified on the document right here in the conversation view. So this could be a great aid for reviewing content that we've identified in email to see very clearly where H5 detected PII information in the document. And so here, George is sharing his credit card information, and we can see how this information has now been proliferated all the way down the thread. If I click down here on message number 14, we've got a branch of communication. George has been removed from this thread altogether, from this conversation, or branched altogether, and now they're talking about marketing materials. And I can even preview the attachment by clicking on this to make sure it doesn't contain any PII information. Looks like, yep, just some marketing material. Let's close that. And now I've got confirmation that I want to redact everything from this message all the way down the branch. I'm going to unselect these items, mark everything from that point forward, and now I'm going to make sure everything that contains that credit card information and CVV code and other details is marked as redacted. I'm going to ignore those attachments, which I don't want because they didn't contain any PII. And so you've got a really nice way of complementing any of the first pass review that you're going to be doing on these documents to identify content that needs to be redacted, especially when working with Blackout. If there is content that maybe you need to develop rules for, et cetera, you've got a really nice way of funneling information into those different groups. Okay. So now we've talked a little bit about the way that we are handling messages where you've got redactions being applied and different features in Blackout and Matter Analytics to interact with the documents. Now we're going to take a look at some documents where Matter Analytics was able to detect PII, but Blackout wasn't, and that's because of some different conditions that we'll show you here. So in this search, again, we see that there's, we haven't marked any of these documents as requiring redaction yet. We've got some, we don't have any warnings here on this set, but let me go ahead and click on our first document. Okay. So this is a really good example of where the power of our approach, our unique approach to PII identification, is really helpful in identifying some hard-to-find content in a data population. This is all handwritten information. The form is rather ugly. We've got a lot of black text on gray backgrounds and all kinds of things. But still, even in that case, we've identified a ton of PII information here. We've detected the presence of date of birth details, general form information, HR details, social security numbers, and so on. And so this is a great example of how, again, using our approach can really help extend your coverage on PII identification and help find those cases where PII may manifest itself in a way that using search strings and numeric patterns are really not going to help you find the document. Another nice thing about this is if we look at this form, it's a pretty big form. We've got a lot of content here. It's fairly well structured. And I think we've got an ability here to say, okay, I can safely, if I've got more of these forms, create a template of some form to redact this and then propagate it to the related or similar documents. And that's another powerful feature of Blackout, which is the ability to create redaction templates on your forms such as this.
Yeah, Jason, if I can jump in there, and thanks for bringing that up. I was going to mention to everyone here another great example of the power of the two tools working together. As you can imagine, Blackout's not going to be able to redact this handwritten PII here. I'm not going to be able to find these names, but Matter Analytics can, and that's the power of the software there. And in addition to the Excel and image jobs we talked about, there's also another job type Jason alluded to, the template job inside of Blackout. And the way a template job would work, as you can imagine, on your case, you're probably not going to have one I9 form or 2 or 3. You're probably going to have 1,000 or 10,000 of these or 100,000 of them. So assuming that those documents, when processed, were tagged in such a way that you can group those together, what you would do with a template job in Blackout is go ahead and take the first one of those I9 forms and make a decision here. Potentially, the top half of this form here should have a redaction placed over it, so you would, as standard in relativity with the image redaction tool, draw that redaction, maybe the signature line, that date down there has a redaction. So you would go ahead and place those redactions on the form. You would then go into your template job, pick your saved search that has all of your 10,000 I9s, reference this I9 that you placed the redactions on as your source document using the artifact ID there, the document ID. Go ahead and run the template job, and Blackout's going to replace the same redaction on all those locations, on all those images, all those I9 forms. So again, definitely a great example of the two tools working together, Matter Analytics to find that PII, and then using your template job to automate that process, make it a bit more efficient so somebody's not going in manually drawing 10,000 boxes in the same location on the same form. So thanks, Jason.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Steve. All right. So now we're going to take another document, or take a look at another document. This one, again, has a lot of handwritten information. We've got a passport renewal form. And I'm going to show you some other tools that can be helpful for Matter Analytics to help understand why we found documents and the types of hits that we're finding on these documents. So again, a pretty ugly document. We've got some we've got some black text on gray backgrounds. We've got all kinds of good stuff here. But still, again, we've been able to find indicators of a lot of different information on the document. Now, instead of our thread viewer, I'm going to switch over to something called the classifier viewer. And this, switch over to looking at both likely and potential here. This is going to show and highlight in text that we've analyzed what it was that triggered our PII assessments on the document. And so this is a good way to visualize what it is that we're doing that's a little bit different. So in this case, the PII itself is not going to come out of any sort of OCR process. It's all handwritten. But we're looking at other things on the document. We're looking at other context cues and features such as the title, U.S. passport renewal application, or things like OMB control number. If I come down here, we've got a lot of form information that we've picked up on as well. So there's a lot of good things that we're looking at and going into our process to be assessed, even in the event that the values themselves are hard to find and not searchable. Here we have another good example of something else that we're doing that you may not find through an alternative approach, which is looking at things that are a bit more conversational, where the PII indicators are a bit more vague, a bit more difficult to latch onto. And in this case, if we look at the tags, we found some information here about account and financial information and some HR info as well. If we look down at the message, we're picking up on things like the employee ID and the account is overdue and things like that. So it's a good indication that we're able to capture things that, again, regular expressions and key terms may provide some challenges for you in finding content like this. In our next example, this is another good document where we've got types of information that again, would be difficult to find with a more traditional approach. This is an offer letter. So if we look down here, we've got some information that we've picked up on in terms of position and salary and bonuses and other information, and we're tagging it as HR information. And one of the nice ways of using our classifier viewer is looking at things from a hit text summary. The hit text basically puts together a summary of all the different indicators that work together to identify this document as containing HR information. A term like bonus by itself is not going to find a document, but that working in conjunction with these other details gives us enough of a picture to make an assessment and be able to identify the document. Another important thing to note is that under metadata hits here, we can show you if there's metadata features that we picked up on. In this case, we paid attention to the file description, which oftentimes is an important factor. We've also looked at file name. So we looked at the file name, it had offer letter in it, and so we're able to grab it with that in conjunction with these other details. We also look at email subjects and a number of other fields so that you can imagine having a resume that was never OCR'd. We're going to be taking into consideration things like the file name, like the email subject. So there's a lot of different ways that we can find these documents and make sure we're returning or maximizing the coverage that's possible with our solution here. Okay. Well, I think that concludes our product demonstration portion of the webinar. We definitely want to make some time for questions and answers. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we have in the Q&A section here. All right.
We have a boatload of questions here.
That's good. That's good.
Awesome.
So if I could start out, one of the things that you just showed us was how the hits or the reasons the redactions, the potential redactions are there. Can you actually extract your hits into a report so that the reviewers don't have to capture that manually?
So I'll answer that first on the H5 side. In terms of what we're identifying in terms of PII content, and we can actually look at a document here just to give you a little bit more of an understanding of what we're looking at. Our focus is really to find the right documents. And so a lot of the information that we're finding may not necessarily be the values themselves. So in this case, for instance, we're finding things like the title and other supporting information. And that's what really gives us the amount of context to find the right document. So there isn't going to be a one-to-one correlation with what it is we identify that Blackout is going to be looking at from a redaction standpoint. So we can do things like summarize our text hits and things like that, but it's not necessarily a summary of the PII values themselves that you're going to have to work with. But Steve, I'll hand it over to you to answer about the Blackout side.
Yeah. I'm assuming the question was a little bit more on the PII coming out of analytics. With Blackout, there's a few different reports part of building out a privilege log even around those results. What we can't find, the way I understood that question, if we're doing a rule like a Social Security number, we're not then figuring out what each individual Social Security number is that hits to that rule and then showing that in a report. Instead, we're just looking for the Social Security number pattern and then redacting it. So we'll let you know the documents that Social Security numbers hit on, but we don't then kind of extract out of the image what that individual number is. We have to do some like extra OCR work there to try to identify what each Social Security number would be against that rule. And just don't do that from a performance standpoint, so we can focus on just building the redactions.
Very good. Very good. And let's see. And this is a question for H5. Is it possible to add custom queries, pattern matching to your technology?
So in terms of what it is that we're identifying, we're focusing on content using something unique to H5, which is our linguistic modeling. And that requires us to use our matter analytics application to actually run what it is that we're finding. We're using regular expressions as a part of those classifications. So, for instance, if we look for Social Security numbers, we're going to use the regular expression as an ingredient in our recipe for Social Security numbers, but we don't need to rely on the presence of that alone. And so oftentimes what we do is we have clients actually supplement our results. Generally, we're providing a very good foundation. Even things that you don't see in our supported list, you're going to find because of the ways that we look for date of birth and other details, so military IDs and things like that. But generally, we're going to give you a really good solid foundation and very extensive coverage. And you can supplement that either using our own fields or your own regular expressions or your own DT search terms or whatever else to help augment some of the things we're identifying. And we can also work with customers in more of a services capacity on ways to help develop things specific for their organization. So for corporations, for instance, who are looking to develop things that are more of a repeatable asset for their way of seeing the world. But as a base, Matter Analytics is going to do a really darn good job in taking into consideration a lot of the things you're probably using today, even if it's not clear by some of the results and the way it's presenting here in the demo.
Very good. Very good. Now, speaking of relativity analytics, what if you are not using relativity analytics? Will this work, for example, if you're using a brain space threading and porting that over into relativity?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So Matter Analytics uses all of its own proprietary algorithms and analytics. So actually, you're not using relativity analytics. You're not using anything that may come out of brain space. All of the threading is completely proprietary to our own. So that's what powers our thread view. All of the PII highlighting and everything else that we do in our classifier view and in the thread is all our own, as well as all the near-dupe algorithms and name normalization capabilities. So all of that is wrapped up and packaged inside of Matter Analytics, and that's what powers all the analytics you saw today.
Very good. Very good. Another specific relativity question. Can you use the bulk updating with relativity's own email thread of visualization?
The bulk updating, so the thread visualization that we showed today is our own thread visualization. So the map view, our bulk edit and everything else is actually relying on our threading details. So you would have to analyze the content with our threading to be able to get used to the thread viewer, all the propagation things that you saw, all the name normalization integration that you saw. So that's still connected to that proprietary core of Matter Analytics.
Very good. And you may have answered this in your presentation and demo, but is there a one-to-one relationship in the results between the H5 identification rules and the Milyli redactions? And if not, how do you address the differences?
Sure. And Steve, maybe we can both answer this question. But in terms of the H5 side, what we're doing is we're using our classifiers, which are not beholden to finding the values, meaning we're not looking specifically and just for the regular expressions. Again, it's a part of what we're looking for, but we're trying to take as many contextual cues off the documents as we can to make sure we reduce the false positives, make sure you have a very sort of non-noisy result set, as well as trying to expand coverage to make sure that you've got a very you've got a lot of the content that you're looking for as a part of the H5 PII result set. Now, from given that, what ends up happening is we're finding a lot of stuff that you would not want to redact because it's, we're looking at form labels, we're looking at other supporting factors and details, and those may not be things that are interesting from a redaction standpoint, but are very, very helpful in finding PII that might be hard to find or easy to find. And then, so that is going to help you find the documents. And really what we're trying to do is reduce the problem area through this combination of tools to then hand over those documents, that subset of documents, to Blackout to then interrogate. And then to the extent that there's documents that Blackout did not apply redactions to, but H5 indicated there was a type of PII present, you can then manually review those, use our thread viewer to move through the email very, very quickly, or use other approaches for going through and looking at the content that Blackout did not identify.
Very good. Very good. Now, another very detailed question. Does Blackout have the ability to redact a certain subset of PII but not others? For example, if certain Social Security numbers are relevant to a case and need to be produced, is there any way to mass redact all Social Security numbers except those that are relevant to the case?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the question, whoever wrote it. Yeah, that's a great example of something you could do with Blackout in thinking about those pattern matching rules. They can actually be written such that you would be identifying Social Security numbers and then building into that regular expression that you're building around your pattern matching rules, all of the specific Social Security numbers that you were looking for in that case. So if you had a set of 10 or 20 or 2,000, you can build that into the rule itself, upload that rule, and the rule is going to say, show me, find all Social Security numbers that aren't one of these X Social Security numbers, and go ahead and redact those, and the rest of them you're going to leave unredacted if that's the need in the case. You can also upload a list of terms. So if the inverse was true, if you wanted to just find a list of 10 or 100 specific Social Security numbers, you can extract that from another system. Something we commonly see is folks downloading a list of first and last names from their Active Directory, their internal employees, and then uploading that through your Blackout job as a list of users. So you can upload hundreds of thousands, millions of names on a list through an Excel file into Blackout, and then you could go through and say, wherever you find these specific terms, go ahead and redact those. So the inverse is true as well there. Thanks for the question, Mary.
Yeah, fantastic. And you can see from the questions we have an educated audience. So here's one for you. Does Blackout create a new production set for both images and natives?
You are going to use the standard relativity production set. So there's, you're right, Mary, a bit of a technical question there, and love those. There's a nuance to kind of setting up your natives when you go to do your production. So there's actually a mass operation where you would flag which of your markup sets you want to pull into that production. And we're actually working now on a whole revamp of how we do production so that we can streamline that process and make it a lot easier based on feedback from our customers. But today it's your regular production set, and you just flag the documents with that mass action that are the natives. All the images are just standard images in relativity, so you can pick the group of documents there that are going to be part of that production and run it, and you will produce those with redactions. Thanks, Mary.
Fantastic. Yeah. Do you have any capabilities to help support data breach response?
Yeah, no, good question. So the PII capabilities that we developed originally were built with an eye towards data breach response. And we didn't get a chance to showcase it today because we're more focused on the redaction capabilities. But our thread viewer allows you an ability to capture details about individuals as you encounter them and add all kinds of information about what you're discovering about those individuals. And then as other reviewers encounter those individuals in other email, they're going to be able to see exactly what's been captured, such as the presence of a social security number or credit card number. So there's a lot of great capabilities there to help support and accelerate data breach. And certainly the likely and potential tags that we give are a really great way to help prioritize content. And then our thread viewer is a great way to move through email very, very quickly, because oftentimes in data breach, email is sort of the core focus, even if PII may manifest in attachments and things like that. So anyway, a very great tool for data breach. And if you're interested, definitely let us know and we can talk about that more directly.
Well, fantastic. We're up at the top of the hour, so I think I want to thank everybody for joining us. And there are still some questions that are unanswered, and I'm sure you guys will make yourself available to answer questions after this webinar. But Jason, do you have any closing comments?
Well, we appreciate everyone's time today, and we hope that this presentation provided you with a clear picture of how H5 Matter Analytics and our ability to identify PII documents differentiates itself and improves upon other techniques, while also accelerating the review with tools such as our thread viewer. And importantly, how our solution can be paired with Milylis Blackout for auto-redaction and native redaction to create a really powerful combination for managing your PII matters, all without leaving relativity, no less. So thank you, and have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, and this is Steve here. Thanks, Jason, for including us, and thanks again to Mary and the ACEDS team for having us. Definitely really excited about the power of Blackout and Matter Analytics working together, and was super excited to have the opportunity to come and show that off to everyone and answer a few questions. And as Mary said, we've got some contact information here, so definitely happy to, if anything wasn't addressed on the call that you want to find out a little bit more about, please do reach out, and happy to talk to you. Thanks again, Mary.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Jason, and thank you, everybody, for hopping on our ACEDS summer webinar series during this wonderful warm summer. We'll see you next time.